But we have to open it back up when we have a lot of traumatic experiences as providers. And that's anyone, even if you walk away saying, oh, well, I handled it well, or I'm okay with how I handled it. Your body had a really difficult experience. And the more we can admit that and say it's still okay to be a midwife or to be a physician or to be whatever, to go back into birth this way, it's okay. We have to admit it first and then begin a conversation of integration so that we don't carry that on to another person and put that on their whatever, their pushing stage, their third stage, because we had some really challenging thing before. It's not going to be her. It doesn't have to be her.
Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. Have you ever found yourself clinging so tightly to something only to realize that it wasn't serving you the way you once thought it would? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to this week's episode of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and today we are speaking with Carey Glenn, a certified professional midwife who is keenly aware of the traps of dogma in all areas of the birthing world. Oftentimes, we're so able to see what's wrong in the hospital system, but do we ever stop and look at our own choices and question why we are making the decisions that we're making? This episode is such a delightful conversation for both mothers and midwives, and I know that you're going to gain beautiful insight on what it's like to walk a balanced path, whatever that looks like for you. Okay, let's jump into the episode. Please remember that the opinions of my guest may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Carey, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Caitlin.
I am honored to have you, and I am so excited at the conversation we are about to embark upon. Now, before we jump into this, would you mind taking just a moment here at the beginning to introduce yourself, maybe a little bit of backstory about who you are, maybe how some people may know you to the listeners?
I have been a midwife since I studied from 8 to 10, and then I practiced in South Carolina and in other places and various capacities. Over these last years, I work with a service organization called Sacred Heartbeats, and I am the midwife in the film These Are My Hours. So some folks may be planning a home birth. I've seen that movie, and I think it says featured as the unobstructive something, but yeah, I was actually hired as a midwife consultant, technically, for the film, because it was during a time that, I might not have been calling myself a midwife also, but it was my friend who I ended up actually practicing with for a period of time also, who was having her fourth baby here in Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh, that's amazing. And These Are My Hours. I remember watching that film and thinking, this is very powerful. This is such a great vision for mothers who are planning to give birth at home and who haven't seen a birth, unfold. And I don't mean like an Instagram birth where there's just the pretty parts and, music overlaid, but a true, like, this is how it happens visual for birth. I think These Are My Hours was phenomenal for that. So just a little plug, everybody. But Carey, today, I want us to really delve into your entire story. You have just such a fascinating story, and I think that all kinds of mothers, midwives will glean something from this. So I really want to ask here at the beginning, how did you become a midwife? What was your journey to that?
Well, it feels like actually it started 20-something years ago, 20-ish years ago, when I was pregnant myself for the first time. My first baby just turned 20 this week, and the world was a different place. There was a lot less access to information, but miraculously, I still found my way to a midwife. I remember when I heard the word, it was like this ancient bell went off in my heart. Like, oh, okay, I can do this. Because when everyone was asking me, 6 weeks in, or who's your doctor? Are you going to the doctor? I was a 23-year-old woman who never imagined there was this train that you're supposed to get on. I didn't even know that like prenatal care all the way through was expected of me. I thought that like I would go later when it was relevant or something. And I just thought, why would I go show up and have someone, what would they even do right now? What are you talking about? I don't like the doctor. Yeah, it just felt like this paranoia train. I went and did one appointment. I had my blood taken from me. I was, I got on the train, though I felt resistant inside of myself. And so after that first appointment, I thought, okay, I see where this would go. The subconscious power was so strong, the conditioning. And so I stepped back and didn't see anyone until I found an ad in a paper magazine at a restaurant, like for parents, that said midwife. It's like, oh, okay, this is how people would do that. That other thing seems crazy. So I found her, and I had care in my home that was pretty satisfying to me. I didn't really personally connect with my midwife that much, but I didn't expect to, really. She was kind and compassionate and faithful in birth. And so I had a good experience. I connected with other mothers. We were meeting together in each other's homes to kind of sew connections and share space before and have like a connection afterwards. So that was all really wonderful, and I enjoyed the experience. So that is a piece of becoming a midwife. But also, I had a birth that went kind of sideways. And then a few years later, when planning a VBAC, it was really challenging to find a provider. That was 2006. And after a lot of very casual treatment of VBACs had been happening with induction medications like Cytotec and different experiments on suturing that folks were trying to do, that it was really hard to find someone. So I went to the farm for that birth. Similarly, I enjoyed my prenatal care. And both times I had really good labors for a lot of that experience, but I had a pretty similar outcome, accepting the way that I was treated the second time, and it left such a more positive impression. The first birth was jarring, and I felt very raw afterwards. And the second time, despite a lot of similarities practically, I had elation and extreme joy and things that I had heard about birth that it still found me there. And I felt like a redemptive quality of nursing both times and had good postpartum care and support. So I was left with a lot of questions of how these two similar experiences had landed so differently, and how could I be a supportive facilitator to first just my friends and folks that I personally knew. I had no dream of being a birth provider until a lot of other folks convinced me that it was okay that I hadn't had a successful home birth, because I carried a lot of anxiety about that. That though I was, so close and had done all of the things, that I was somehow not qualified to that space. But a lot of processing gave me different feelings and a lot of confidence from others. And the drive in my heart to humbly offer that service of what I now refer to as like nervous system awareness as a provider. Trauma informed is a term that people are using, that I use. But yeah, that's kind of the whole journey of why.
It seemed, I know that we've spoken before about this, and you seemed like even in your pregnancy as you were preparing to give birth, you were learning so much about the birthing process. You knew so much even then. It's interesting to think about how you were, you were already absorbing all of this information about what you would need to know to support others later, even during your own preparation for pregnancy.
Probably going back in the why is that my first favorite story was a birth story. My dad was a great storyteller and a great reader at night. I mean, my mom too, but dad really told the stories. And he often, very, very often, told me my own birth story. He would kind of mention that the first birth had been hard for her. My brother's a lot older than me. And that so the next time they took classes and they learned things and they shared it with my brother, and he was going to come to the birth, and mom swam all the pregnancy, and just this whole setup for then. And on a Sunday morning her water broke and she said, well, let's just go on to the church meeting. And he said, no honey, I think we should go by the hospital. You're from the things we learned in birth class. And I was born at 12:08 noon after a really short, wonderful labor from their description. And, he concluded with how they snuck my brother up the staff elevator and they all passed me around between them. And he just had such joy. And I conferred that birth is healing. Birth is potentially so healing and transformative. And he told that story as recently as we had a craniosacral therapist, myofascial trainer, come to our house last year several times to train a group of folks. And the teacher stayed with my parents next door. And on the last morning of the training, she came over to have breakfast and said, well, I see why you're a midwife now. Your dad told me your birth story this morning.
Oh.
And so when I became pregnant myself, I hadn't really. I do actually remember as a teenager hearing a couple things from older women about birth that were scary, sort of war tale stuff, really more about the hospital. But that gave me, maybe it's not like what I thought it was. Maybe that's a different story now, at least, or a possibility that I didn't know. And also as an adolescent, how much are you really wanting to consider that vulnerability? But then I just dove in so deep as soon as I was pregnant. I think both pregnancies I read 25 plus books, going to libraries locally and bookstores and borrowing things from people and finding textbooks of friends. Like I read my friend's nursing textbook who was going to school at that time, like just anything I could get. We didn't have social media. I think my mom had a computer that went on the internet, but it was abstract to me, which is also a blessing I find now. I was really able to go slower than a lot of times folks are now. And the number of impressions of what I should do or, were less, but also I didn't have images like these are my hours. It was so hard to imagine and visualize a lot of these experiences being so different than what was culturally around me.
That is a great point. It is the double-edged sword, I feel like, of the social media era where information is so easy to gain, and yet you can drown yourself in it, and then become even more confused. But yes, things like these are my hours. Hearing birth stories can be so impactful. But yes, there's just so much noise. So that's a really fascinating point. Thank you for that. Now, you had your two children. In the timeline, where is that with becoming a midwife?
I had my second baby in 2006, after the first in '03. And then I guess when I was pregnant with her, was the first person I helped with nursing. It was my niece. I still remember like the anxiety of like touching another person and guiding or directing in something that was so personal, a big hurdle to overcome, to step into someone else's space and say, hey, I know something, because I wasn't really confident except in my own experience. So I did that when pregnant, and then it just kind of cascaded from there into helping others I knew nurse.
Mm.
More folks in my community, my intimate associates, were having babies. And so I started offering, or really, telling them when they were pregnant, if you need anything after, I'll come over. I can help. I had a really hard time, but it worked out. I can show you, or just, be with you, come over. And those experiences built into sharing La Leche League with people also, because it had been such an amazing resource of support for me. And I did the leadership training in 2007 and 8. My was really to function in that role primarily, and then offer a little bit of postpartum support as a doula. And then I was encouraged, guided, called, and literally called by a midwife in 2008 who said, I've heard that you're really great with nursing. I've heard that, you would be great with birth. Would you like to come in and help with my practice a little bit? She was in a pinch for having lost an admin. And so that was my foot in the door. And then I apprenticed from 2008 to 10 and licensed as a midwife in South Carolina. It was about 4 years I practiced that way, and was pretty burnt out from that, and also juggling motherhood and, yeah, a lot of different stuff. And so I stepped back with also some stress and anxiety around the integrity of midwifery, which is a huge conversation of how many rules and how do we apply those, and who gets to be an authority where, and what does it mean if you carry a license? Are you able to serve people fully? And I was pretty swayed by like a lot of different voices there to say I would like to operate in this very black and white space of where I'm rejecting all of that altogether. Though really, I had learned from a great preceptor a pretty nuanced, informed consent, and declination that I had attempted to embody and follow, but it felt like I needed more. I needed more of an extreme, I guess, in my position, particularly around VBACs, because that was so personal to me. To be approached by so many of them and to feel like there was this outlaw quality to it gave me a feeling that I would rather step away and create another or join another paradigm. And I formed a private membership association with Emily, who is the mom in These Are My Hours. And we worked that way for a number of years, but with not a lot of practice, because it was, now we talk about medical freedom and people have heard more about membership associations. But in 2015, people were like, why does your contract say Constitution? Like, I don't get it. But I still, through word of mouth and through travel, had really lovely experiences, getting to go to Amish country a few times. Yeah, over the next handful of years. And then when working with the film, which was in 2016, and traveling with it afterwards and starting an educational program with it, I don't know, I got to talk about this conversation a lot of times, and I found a new space of nuance that felt comfortable to me. And so I obtained my CPM by the experienced midwife route, and then relicensed in South Carolina in 2019. I would like to walk a middle path around birth, the direct, humble experience with the transformation from and through the divine that it offers us all. It's a space of profound insight, all from pregnancy through postpartum and all of mothering. I mean, really, to be a human and to walk in nature offers these examples, but birth is nature. Birth is part of the design. And I really think a lot of those things, regardless of who and how they were designed in our system, they serve the purpose of taking us away from that conversation, that heart and spirit conversation, and instead replaces it with all of these minor, in comparison, things. I mean, not that your life or your health are minor, but if it is just a series of paranoid tests through your pregnancy, you're thinking about that. Am I going to pass this test? What does it mean? Is it wrong? If I don't take it, is it? And then all your bandwidth is over there. And with everything else, our bandwidth also has to be consumed with in modern daily living or already mothering. And you don't get those quiet reflections that can really carry you into a new spiritual experience as a person walking this earth. Birth is an altered state and takes you away in the most wonderful possible ways. But it becomes, rather than dreamlike, somewhat nightmarish for people if they are held with fear. And that fear is reflected and in a feedback loop through that experience. And I see it definitely all the way through postpartum and then into mothering, like how that causes someone to walk, where they look for authority, and how confident they approach their decisions. And that's the space where it all grows.
Yes.
So it's truly the honor of a lifetime to demystify this conversation with people as best I can, or just to open the door that it doesn't have to be that way. If you want to, you can walk however you want, but it can feel really beautiful and really insightful and like the greatest connection with your creator and with your family and with your baby. If you have people around you who also feel that way and support your feeling that way, where you will then especially know if there is something to be concerned about. Your body will tell you, especially if you're able to be in your body.
Exactly.
Because you are not experiencing constant delusional concern. That suddenly, because you're pregnant, you're a ticking time bomb, and your baby is automatically a ticking time bomb. Like it's got to have a pretty big gate within you to stop that that pressure from society and culture and time. But I see women do it all the time and have really, really beautiful experiences and walk in confidence after that.
I think that is such a fascinating point. When it comes to listening to our intuition, what I realized in my own life was, for many people, I've noticed it seems like it's almost impossible. Like, how do I know? How do I know what my body's telling me? How do I understand my intuition? And for me, it was far less about learning to hear my intuition and far more about turning off the noise around me and just giving some space, giving some quiet to hear. When we remove what we think that these are helpful things, but really it's crutches. And when we remove those, we see that, oh, actually I can walk. Actually, my intuition has been here all the time. What I feel is this connection to the Holy Spirit. It's been here. I just haven't been able to hear it because I've been listening to everybody else tell me what to do. And how powerful to finally be able to access that, like you said, not just for the birthing experience, but the birthing experience is a microcosm of the macrocosm. And what we experience in birth, as you said, so often and easily translates into what we experience in motherhood. We have the opportunity to integrate whatever we experience, into a way that supports us during motherhood. But how amazing to be able to use that time to strengthen ourselves and to recognize how much we have been gifted, how much we can do on our own, with what we have, instead of listening to all of these outside voices. Have you ever gotten unbelievably excited about your healthcare? Now, this may sound like a joke, but I am not joking. When my family learned about Samaritan Ministries and made the decision to leave our insurance plan and move to a biblically based healthcare sharing ministry, I was left with a feeling of joy and excitement because the difference in experience was so colossal. Let's take pregnancy and birth, for example. In the health share model, here's what we experienced with Samaritan. We submitted our need, which means we let Samaritan know about our medical expenses. And this is when the fun begins. Samaritan shares that need with their members, directing the members to send us payment to help cover those medical needs. Want to know the most beautiful part? That's not all they send. So often with my shares, I would receive a note of encouragement or a thoughtful prayer. The touch of another human letting me know that my family is on their mind and in their heart. It is such a beautiful biblical model, and it's truly what has kept my family around for so many years. I'm sure this has piqued your interest, so hop over to the show notes where you can find a link that will take you to learn even more amazing reasons why hundreds of thousands of Christ followers are moving to Samaritan Ministries for their healthcare needs.
Right. And it may look like for some people getting an opportunity to perform self-advocacy. Not that everything just goes perfectly and no one ever even tries to offer you advice or intervene and like, did you're in this bubble, because that won't be how you live in your mothering.
Right.
You will have many opportunities where you have to make pretty complicated decisions and communicate in effectual ways that leave you feeling good. And it's it's a practicing ground in pregnancy and birth. Really influential to me early on in my training and experience was to become a hypnodoula and take the classes associated with all of that, having a lot of clients that used a hypnobabies method and learning how much, like what you just said, that these fast-paced thoughts of everyone around you are clattering up your brain at this high speed where it can't download the real true information that's important to your body and your consciousness. It's just going too fast. There's not enough space. That began the journey of understanding like the altered space of birth, what that meant, and what that translates to in your physical brain, and besides your experience. And then drumming continued that because it does a really fascinating thing to your nervous system and brain, and that if there are multiple rhythms going on at the same time, you slow down really automatically because it crowds out all of that other stuff. And so learning different ways of sharing with people how to quiet that, even if it's really close to you. Hypnobabies use the bubble of peace, and people may use different forms of meditation or prayer or binaural beats, or there are all kinds of different tools that can be used to slow your mind down to help you find your body and where that more whisper conversation can be found. And that's an exciting conversation to share with people, like how to connect with your intuition, with your spiritual experience, because that's the more sustainable route for mothering. Everyone's voices actually conflict with each other, and no one knows, and there are no rules. So you have to really find yourself as a mom.
I
And
love
that
that.
starts in pregnancy.
That's great, Carey. So where are you now in terms of your practice with Sacred Heartbeats and with midwifery, all of it? Where do you find yourself?
Well, after I relicensed in 19, I've seen a continued growth because, of course, right after that was the worldwide change of everything, and many more people moved to my area. Many more people began to have a conversation about stepping outside the system, and even more niche versions of it. So I've enjoyed a really healthy practice that's at a sustainable volume for me for the last several years. I have had a wonderful student, Michaela Cole. She's at Barefoot Birth over the last year, and we are entering a phase of being able to mutually support one another as we both engage in practices in our communities, and that feels really, really great. I have several apprentice students that we're operating a beta testing situation for a midwifery studies course with a mentorship component. and trying to design a framework that feels sustainable for those who want to become midwives, because that's often a really, really arduous and overwhelming, hazing sort of situation, it feels like. So we're trying to be creative and intentional about that process. And I have worked with my husband to create a series of percussion recordings with the things I was mentioning before in mind, but it's a really beautiful piece of music, essentially, that is designed to be used anytime you would like to connect with your body and your spirit, to slow down and listen. But it is an homage to birth, but in reflection of the phases of labor. The earlier tracks are active and engaging to get you, moving your body, and it slows down and is more sparse and open as the birth tracks and postpartum are playing. But in the thread throughout the entire piece is a mama baby track, where one side of the rhythm is at the typical heartbeat of a mother in labor and or range, and then one is at the typical heart rate of a baby. And those two work together to perform that polyrhythmic function I was mentioning, that lets you downshift in your brain, and your body goes to that state of rest and calm if you're in a safe space and able to really tune in and listen. And our heart rates will actually entrain to, and our nervous systems entrain and regulate with one another and with the rhythms around us. So there have been a lot of really cool studies in music therapy and things like that we were drawing from and on in the creation of this offering to the world. But it's in the mastering process, and we should have a product really soon. So it's very exciting.
That is amazing. And actually, at the release of this, it may already be ready. And if it is, then I will be sure that it's in the show notes. And if it's not quite ready, then as soon as it is, we'll be sure to add it to the show notes. But Carey, this has been such a fascinating conversation, and just really insightful into kind of the beauty of midwifery care and all that it entails, and then also some of the ways that maybe we'll see change in the future. I don't know, it just feels like a really inspiring place for us to go.
Thank you for having me. It's a conversation I especially want to expand to providers. Really, moms and those that are preparing to be moms, they seem pretty hip to most of this, the ones that I'm encountering. Nervous system conversation, nuance and regulation and choice, informed choice. They're aware, but providers, I feel like, are they're lost in practice a little bit. They have a tremendous amount of their own trauma to work with. And to admit and acknowledge it is the first piece, before you just continue going on with your practice. One of the most pivotal experiences I had when touring with the film was speaking at a birth trauma conference, where a woman who'd had a really challenging experience was speaking with a lot of negativity towards providers, understandably so, very understandably so. But I was able to pivot in my presentation that unfortunately was to follow hers, where I thought, oh, I'm going to stand up and be the midwife after all this was said about the midwife. But I just told the truth. Like, a lot of times we're operating from a traumatized paradigm as a group, and a ton of fear being sandwiched between authority bodies ourselves. And many things in our practical lives hinging around that, besides also whatever compulsions you may have towards a conscience. That decision may not have occurred to you before that moment, like where your integrity would land. And mistakes are made, and people do not know always what they're doing at the time. But we have to open it back up when we have a lot of traumatic experiences as providers. And that's anyone, even if you walk away saying, oh, well, I handled it well, or I'm okay with how I handled it. Your body had a really difficult experience. And the more we can admit that and say it's still okay to be a midwife, or to be a physician, or to be whatever, to go back into birth this way, it's okay. We have to admit it first. And then begin a conversation of integration so that we don't carry that on to another person and put that on their whatever, their pushing stage, their third stage, because we had some really challenging thing before. It's not going to be her. It doesn't have to be her, but we have to admit it and we have to talk about it. We have to not just peer review in this tokenized way, but you got to cry.
Mm.
You have to cry and admit you were scared, that you didn't know what to do, and you maybe said the wrong thing. Or have the hard conversations in a postpartum with someone if the birth didn't go the way they planned. Don't gaslight them and just tell them it was okay, we did the best we could. Like, walk through the hard stuff and integrate your own trauma as a provider, and then walk forth with that awareness that you can share with others.
That is such a wonderful point. And I think that it's also really important for me to acknowledge anyone who chooses to become a midwife or serve mothers during such a pivotal process. You are so brave and courageous. I mean, it takes such bravery and courage to put yourself into a situation, especially if you're doing it with care and consideration and love for these other people, knowing that your actions are going to be remembered, are critical and important. That is a very brave thing to do, and we want more women to do it. And at the same time, there's so much that comes along with that, that, like you said, produces trauma, and we have to acknowledge that and to be able to walk through our own aspects of trauma and walk with the person that we were serving through any aspects of trauma that perhaps they had as well.
Right. And I just want to hit on like our real reiteration point that I share often is trauma is born from a lack of agency where you don't understand what happened and you don't feel like you had a choice, and then a lack of expression about that experience. And so just at a baseline with all providers that and with all people, that can happen in a multitude of ways. But even if you can't happen or can't control what happens on the first side of that conflict internally, we have many, many tools to alchemize it on the other side, to offer vulnerable expression and the telling of our truth, and to find those that will help us integrate by understanding and then regain that agency. Creativity of expression is a really healing part of my journey, and I would love to see more folks have access to that. That's on my agenda in the coming months, is having more creative circles with women where we're making art together. We have a local birth circle where we do a lot of cool stuff, but I'd like to see even more of this hands-on expressive opportunity to, in a non-linear way, open up our psyches to share with vulnerability so that we can make a medicine of that for ourselves and others.
This was such a beautiful conversation, Carey. Once again, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so glad you live in my town.
Me too. We'll get coffee again.
All right.
Oh boy, how great was that? Let's go ahead and start with our educational tidbit. In this week's episode, we heard about the importance of nervous system healing as it relates to the healing of trauma. My friends, this is so critical. For today's educational tidbit, I want to give a quick introduction to a technique to support the nervous system called havening. This really focuses on the healing of the nervous system. So here's what you'll do. And if this sounds confusing to you, click on the YouTube link in the episode show notes and you can watch me as I'm doing this. Okay, so I want you to cross your arms over your body, right arm to left shoulder, left arm to right shoulder. And now you're going to swipe your palms down your arms fully, allowing your palms to touch just for a bit there at the end. Okay, and then you're going to do that again, swiping from the shoulder, down your arm, down your forearm, and then allowing those palms to cross over one another and swipe all the way off. You do this again and again. You can go relatively quickly and continue doing that for a little while. Now, after you've done this for a bit, Take the palms of your hands and gently swipe them down your face. So starting right below your eyes and go down to your jaw. You're going to do this again and again. And while you're doing this, I want you to really feel the textures. So feel the texture of your arm against your palm. Feel the texture of your palm against your arm. What does your palm feel like against your face? Notice these sensations. As you keep going, your brainwave state will actually begin to change. You'll begin to create delta brainwaves, which are associated with healing and relaxation. Doing this before sleep is perfect because it will help you get into a great place for falling asleep. Now, this is actually just the first step of havening. If you'd like to explore the practice further, I've got some introductory videos linked below. But the science on this is incredible, and the impact that it's had on people for PTSD and specifically for childbirth trauma is amazing. One session of this can go a long way. It can make a huge impact. So check those links below for additional video resources. But nervous system healing, in my opinion, is one of the big missing pieces of childbirth education and preparation. And this is the type of information that we focus on strongly inside of the Home Birth Collective. If you're looking to not only prepare for the act of giving birth, but to completely take hold of your birthing and motherhood experience, check out the show notes for more information on that. All right, now let's jump into this week's episode roundup. I love Carey's well-rounded approach. In the years that I've been involved in birth, I have certainly seen strong dogmatic camps. You have to give birth in the hospital. It's the only way. You have to have a nurse midwife. It's the only way. You have to have a free birth. It's the only way. My friends, let's make space for nuance. When we cling to ideology instead of intuition, it's easy to become confused and honestly manipulated. Next, the importance of care providers choosing to heal. This is huge. Midwives, are you processing your trauma? Do you feel that you have the resources to do so? Seek support, seek community. Community among birth workers. Oh my goodness, we need it. Please do not isolate yourself. This work is heavy, but beautiful. Finding healing can help you prevent burnout and allow you to care for your clients as fresh individuals without carrying in the baggage of previous experiences along with your midwifery bag into the birthing space. Finally, you've got to check out Carey's drumming tracks. They are so beautiful, so enjoyable, and so likely what I'll be listening to the next time I give birth. There's a link in the show notes. Okay, my friends, such a beautiful episode. That's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.